In today's video, we're going to do something slightly different. It's all about wealth building and wealth creation and what, in my opinion, what financial experts won't tell you about money. Now, what I've got on the screen now is what's called the buy, borrow, die strategy. And what we're going to do in this video is walk through the 3 steps. But firstly, I'm going to tell you why financial experts get things wrong and why they are lying to you and why you might not be further along in life in terms of wealth than you'll like to be. So again, if you like the sound of that, all I ask for is that you smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Now, before we look at my own account and I show you an example of this strategy in action, we're going to go through firstly the traditional way that we've all been taught in schools if you've got a financial advisor on how to build wealth. Now, it's actually just step one of the buy, borrow, die strategy, where you've been told that to save a percentage of your paycheck and go buy income generating assets. Now, that could be real estate, that could be stocks, that could be royalties in piece of music or art collecting or whatever it may be. And you buy those assets, you hold on to those assets, and over time, those assets appreciate in value. Now, that's not bad advice, and that's actually step one of the buy, borrow, die strategy. However, what they then tell you to do is sell that later on in life, so then you can then use the appreciation of those assets to go retire on and all these other good things, which isn't a bad strategy. What it does do is two challenges. One, it limits your growth in terms of buying additional assets because you're not using the appreciation of those assets to buy more assets. What you're doing there is using those assets to go fund your lifestyle through that appreciation. And then secondly, what that does is that triggers a taxable event. So if I buy a share for $100 and I sell it for $200 in 20 years' time, I am taxed on that $100 gain at the capital gains tax for your particular country and what that is set is. Now, so how can we not buy more assets to compound our wealth more without spending more time at a day job or getting a higher day job? And B, how can we avoid paying little to no tax on the appreciation of our assets? So now this is where the difference comes in with the buy, borrow, die strategy and what financial experts don't tell you. So step one, buy the assets. We'll keep it with stocks and shares because that's what I do. I've got real estate as well, but in terms of the people that come to my channel, it's all about stocks and all these other good things and selling options and all those good things. So let's just say now we buy some assets. Now I'm going to take you into my account here so you can kind of see an example on Tesla. So you can see here on the chart here that I own 100 shares of Tesla at a cost basis of 154.66. So my cost basis is sitting at 15.5K that I've invested into Tesla. Now Tesla is currently valued at $345, which you can see here is an unrealized P&L of 19,087. Yes, I lost $1,200 today. Tesla had a down day, but as of current recording, I am up 19 grand. Tesla was all the way up in the 400s before, so I was up to nearly 30 grand at one point on this stock. Now, that's an example of step one, buying assets. Now, let's go into step two. Step two, instead of selling the assets, which will trigger a capital gains taxable event, what we can do is we can borrow against our assets for a very cheap interest rate. Now, what does that actually mean? So what that means is if you are with a broker like I am with Interactive Brokers, they allow you to borrow against your assets, either as cash or to invest in additional stock. Now, what that means is that IBKR, again, I'm looking at one stock example here, but it will take it across the overall portfolio. What it allows you to do is borrow up to 50% of your portfolio value. Now, to keep it simplistic here, let's just say that we're up 19 grand and I only have this one stock in my portfolio and my current stock value or my current cost basis is what? So it's going to be around like just over 30 grand account, right? So what it will allow me to do is borrow around $15,000 in cash the very next day at a small interest rate. Probably at today's interest rate will probably be around 4%, right? Now, what does that allow me to do? Well, firstly, it allows me to gain access to that appreciation today without triggering a capital gains. Now, in where I live inside the UK, if you forget your capital gains allowance, which is quite small now anyway, I'm paying 20%. So let's say it's 20 grand. I'm paying 4 grand in capital gains tax. Whereas now I can borrow, let's say I want to borrow five grand or 10 grand, let's call it 10 grand to keep the number simple, at a 4% interest rate, right? So that means in the whole year of that 10 grand, I am only being charged $400 of interest to leverage $10,000. Whereas here I'm getting charged 4 grand, right? Even if it was 10 grand, it will be 2 grand in tax that I will have to pay all in one sum out of this 19 grand. Now, the other benefit of borrowing against your asset and selling your asset is the opportunity cost of the asset continuing to grow in the future. So, for example, if I've got a hypothesis that Tesla's going to go to $1,000 a share, but I sold today and took my 19 grand and paid my 4 grand in tax, I lose out between 345 all the way up to $1,000 of additional gains that stock or asset could do to me. Yes, Tesla could go back down, it could drop all the way back down to zero, it could go bust, all of those things. But again, if you're investing in likes of Apple, Nvidia, Meta, Google, all of these massive billion-dollar companies, and you've got it across a range of a whole portfolio, the likelihood of you actually losing money over the long term is relatively low, right? So assuming that you had a portfolio that was growing 10, 15% a year, which again is quite easily able to do if you pick the right stocks, is that you can start leveraging borrowing money against it and still have the future upside of all of these stocks. That's the critical piece here, is what people don't talk about with the buy, borrow, die strategy is the opportunity cost of the additional gain that your asset can have. Because once you sell it, that's it. If then Tesla doubles the next day, you don't take part in that growth. But if I borrow against Tesla on my gains that I've made and Tesla continues to go up, I then still have that upside, which allows me again to borrow more money inside the future. Now, the next step of this is so you borrow against your assets. But what does that actually mean? What exactly can you borrow? So as I mentioned earlier, you can take it out as cash, right? And go put it as a down deposit for another real estate property. Or what you can do is borrow against it and take that money. So if I took 5 grand out of my Tesla position and I put it into Nvidia, right? Therefore, Nvidia will also then go up. If that goes up in value, then I'm making money on the margin, the money that I'm borrowing. Now, question people have at this point is, well, you're paying a 4% interest rate. How do you pay that back? When do you pay that back? All of those kind of good questions. And they're all valid questions. Now, the beauty of this is because this is not a loan like a bank loan or a loan you get when you get a car, which you have to pay amortized payments of X amounts a month until your thing's cleared. With these types of loans, because it's backed by your stock or your asset, you don't actually need to pay back the interest. Like you'll still accrue your interest. So if I borrow 10 grand and I don't, unless the interest rate's 4%, at the end of the year, my balance that or outstanding balance that I owe would be 10,400, and it will just keep going on because eventually what will happen is either the stock tanks and therefore you get what's called a margin call of then what the bank or Interactive Brokers would do is sell my Tesla stock enough of shares to cover the 10 grand or 10,400 in this example, and I might be left with like 20 shares depending on what's going on inside the market. So that is the risk to this. But obviously, if again, I'm not going into how to do it and the mechanics behind it. If you want videos on that, again, drop me a comment. I can look to make those types of videos. But what I'm doing is trying to explain the overall strategy on what they do. Now, another classic example is Elon Musk and the purchase of Twitter. Right. So Elon Musk owns a lot of Tesla shares, a lot more than the 100 that I own, and that is worth billions if he sold it all today. So instead of selling all of those Tesla shares and then A, triggering a capital gains tax for him, and also B, losing all the opportunity cost of all the potential increase in Tesla into the future, what he does, he rings up a bank and says, look, I've got X billion of worth of Tesla shares. I want to borrow X percent of that in cash. And because A, it's Elon Musk, B, it's a lot of money, he probably would have got a very, very low interest rate agreed. And then what he does, he'll then take that money and then go and buy Twitter in cash for that money. Now he has another asset in Twitter, which God knows what he's really doing with it at the moment. But assuming that appreciates in value, he can then either sell that or borrow against that one and keep that process going. And in terms of paying back the interest, so as I said, don't need to pay off the interest if you don't want to, or you can use other forms of income like your day job income or whatever it may be to go pay that off. What I like to do and what I dedicate this channel to is option premium, right? So again, you guys have seen my income statements and my dividends, all of these things, a few $1,000s every single month that I earn. That money is used to borrow the margin that I'm doing. So when I used to invest heavily into YieldMax funds, I used to borrow against my account, buy YieldMax funds, and then the dividends that I get from the YieldMax funds will pay off that margin or that loan that I'm getting. So my day job income is still doing my running of the expenses, and I'm not contributing any of my own hard-earned money or earned income into investing into buying assets, right? My option premium allows what I do is borrow against my assets, and what I do is use that money to go buy more assets. So again, I've got 100 shares of Nvidia. I've started to build up a position in Nike, in AMD, etc., etc., etc. That's all paid for by margin, and my YieldMax is all paid for by margin. And my option premium, selling covered calls, selling puts, the 1-1-1 strategy, the strangles, and the YieldMax dividend income, all of that goes back into the account to pay off that margin. And then that cycle just repeats itself over and over and over again. Now, that said, we still have stage 3, which I'm not there yet, and hopefully I don't want to be there for a long time. Is step 3 is eventually IBKR know that I'm going to die at some point. And at that point that's where they go get their money back in terms of the money that I borrowed against them and the interest that may or may not have accrued over that time. But the advantage is, so if I go back to this Tesla example, my cost basis is, let's call it 155 to make the numbers easy. Now, let's say Tesla, by the time on the day I pass away, is at $10,000 a share, right? So let's hope it's for a long time away. Is what happens is, and let's say I borrowed 30 grand. There's 30 grand I borrowed from IBKR as part of this whole process of Tesla, and that's the amount that I owe. When I pass away, what will happen is that hopefully my son, that my heir will take over my account and my assets and all these kind of good things. And what will happen is that he will get what's called a step up in cost basis, which means that the price of Tesla on the day I die, let's call it $10,000, is my quote unquote, in the eyes of the taxman, my kind of cost basis, right? So then what will happen is that they will sell my shares to get their 30 grand back. And depending on where Tesla is, if they sell my Tesla shares below 10,000 to go get their 30,000 back, I or my son will pay zero in tax. If it was at $11,000, therefore he's only paying their 1,000 capital gains tax at 20% or per share, whatever it is, to then to then pay the tax man. He's not paying it at the 154.66, which would be a lot bigger of a tax bill than at the current day of the day of my passing of what Tesla shares is. Now, hopefully that makes sense. So again, I'll try to explain that very, very quickly one more time. Let's keep the numbers simple. Let's just say you got stock A at $100. That's the cost basis of somebody. And then when they pass away, the current price of that stock is $200. And let's say he's borrowed X amount of money. So IBKR, what they will do is they will start selling stock at $200 until they paid back that person's loan. That person, heirs, would be liable for a capital gains tax at the new cost basis of 200, which again, if they sold it at 200, he wouldn't pay any tax because he bought some shares at 200 and he sold some shares at 200 in the eyes of how the tax system works today, even though the cost basis of that individual was 100. So that's how this process works. And again, if you are doing step one correctly and you borrow a sensible amount to go reinvest back into step one, your wealth will compound a lot quicker over time. Because in this example here, right, let's just say I make 200 grand a year. I've held this for God knows how long now, probably the best part of a year. So I've made 20 grand or 19 grand in a year. Now imagine how much of a pay rise I've got to get, a bonus I've got to get, or whatever it is I've got to get to go make 20 grand in a year. And then if I borrow 10 grand of that and go reinvest those in the right assets that are high profitability, low PE, low intrinsic value, and high discounted cash flow products, so stable, profitable growth companies. There's so many of them out there, and start investing all of that money into there, as well as the option income and the dividend income pays off some of the loan and then pays off some of the keeps buying more stock, increases the number of how much your portfolio, your value is here. Therefore, you'll have more to borrow against it. So if you said, I'm only going to borrow 10% of my portfolio value, and you start with a 10 grand portfolio, the max you can borrow is $1,000. But over time, as your portfolio goes from 10 grand to 100 grand, right, you now got 10 grand to borrow. 500 grand, you got 50 grand to borrow. Again, you're still keeping that same percentage, but you see how then you can go buy more assets quicker as if you get step one correct. Now, getting step one correct is not easy, I'll tell you that for a fact. And there's a number of mistakes I've made, but I feel like I'm in a good place now with it, of understanding how to buy quality companies that are undervalued, i.e. their intrinsic value is low. So if you're interested in a video like that, drop me a like, make sure you subscribe and comment down below. That's what you want to see. Hope you found this video useful, and I shall see you guys in the next one.